Award, and Tom Lewis is here to present that. Tom?
I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to present the Career Achievement Award to Dave Slovak. I think all these speeches and presentations need to start with some kind of a joke. And I got a simple joke here, because I've been the subject of a lot of jokes to great misery from Mr. Slovak. My dad told me this joke because he was quite bald. He said, "Son, if you're bald in the front, you're a thinker. And if you're bald in back, you're a lover. And if you're bald in front and back, you think you're a lover." How does that pertain to Dave? He's neither bald in front nor back, so he's neither a thinker or a lover. In all seriousness, 25 years ago, I was practicing in that time as a solo practitioner in Great Falls. And one day, Dave Slovak came up to see me, and he says, "I'm going to leave my firm." And he was a partner in a well-established, very successful, mostly defense firm, although he did quite a bit of plaintiff's work in that firm. He said, "I'm going to leave my firm and I'm going to take a sabbatical, and I wonder if when I come back, would you hire me as an associate?" I told him, "I don't need any associate. And I don't think there's any opportunity here, but I'll think about it." So he went on his sabbatical, did quite a bit of traveling, and he came back and he saw me and he says, "I've got an offer you can't possibly refuse." He said, "I'll work for you for a year for nothing, and then you can decide I'm worth anything, and maybe you'll make me a partner." I was pretty impressed by that, and I also had cases against him and knew what a brilliant lawyer he was. So I got sucked in, and he didn't work for nothing. I paid him pretty substantial salary. But after a year, he was a partner, and we practiced together for right around 25 years. Dave's attributes are many, but the first thing about him is he really cares about his client. If the client is his client, it means everything to him. He's an absolute meticulous preparer. I've never seen anyone put a case together any better than Dave does. He's an extremely capable advocate. He can always pick the winning issue. And I think that's a hallmark of any trial or appellate lawyer. If you pick the wrong issue, or if you throw too much mud at the wall and pick too many issues, you lose traction with district courts and appellate courts. Dave could always pick the winning issue. And some of it, and I don't like to be too anecdotal here, but I will be a little bit. I'll give you an example of his preparation. So probably our most successful case was the Sunburst case. And I think that trial went 3 or 4 weeks, and we were pretty much on the edge of the law in a lot of ways. It was a novel case. It was a toxic spill case, and we got a verdict. It was a substantial verdict on the order of $15 million. And the jury also determined that the defendant was guilty of malice. So under Montana law, as everyone here knows, you have immediate argument on the punitive damages. So I had done the final argument, and Mark Kovas was involved in that case. He did some remarkable work on the expert testimony and that sort of thing. I had done the final argument, but I hadn't prepared anything for the punitive damage argument. I was going to get up there and wing it, and Dave looked at he had a file. He says, "I've got this." And he went up and he argued the punitive damages. Took him about 30 minutes. And a couple hours later, the jury came back with $25 million punitive damage award. And of course, then he got to tell us, it took you guys 3 weeks to get $15 million, and it only took me 30 minutes to get $25 million. But he is truly a brilliant lawyer. Another story I'll tell about Dave. A lot of lawyers can point to cases that never went to court or only went to court for a short time and they were resolved. And they are some of the greatest successes that lawyer may have, and nobody ever knows about them. We had a case involving a lively young man. He was at the fairgrounds in Great Falls, and there was this metal barrier that sort of ran by waist high, and he put his hands on it and he swung under it, and when he did that, the barrier was not attached and it crushed his skull. And the target was a municipality and a county, and of course we know we have limits, statutory limits of what you can recover, and everybody thought it was a $750,000 case. Well, Dave didn't think so, and together we found a reinsurance policy that was written very loosely, and we called it an umbrella policy to expand the limits, and we got a judge to agree with us, and then Dave went to work, and he's remarkable at getting the job done in settling major cases. The long and the short of that case, and it demonstrates two aspects of Dave's great talent, is number one, he never gives up, and he always gets the most, but he cares about the client, as I said earlier. So we recovered $15 million in the case that nobody thought we could get more than $750,000. And Dave nursed that young man who could neither see, could barely walk, and his family, and for years, they would come in, and he cared about him. We'd collected our fee, we'd taken care of them economically, but he went the rest of the way. In later years, I would say his greatest asset was getting the final dollar in any case when we were talking settlement. I don't know how he did it. He always seemed to get more for the case than anybody else in the firm, and then he would come in when we went to a settlement conference and got a great settlement, and he'd say, should have got $100,000 more. But anyway, Dave Slovak well deserves this award. I'm proud to have been a partner of him for all these years, and congratulations, Dave.
Unlike the Academy Awards, they actually tell you when you win some award at MTLA. So I've probably had about 2 weeks to somewhat digest this. And that means I have had 2 weeks to think. And when you win an award or some recognition and if it's lifetime or career, it's a little bit like the Jackson Browne song where you have a little too much time to think about the past. And the best advice I ever got in law school was from a very dear friend, still a great friend. And he just said, Slovak, if you don't think too well, don't think too much. And for the most part, over the last 39 years, I've honored that, and with some pretty good results and great professional satisfaction. But when I've had these 2 weeks to think, there's a couple of hundred people to thank, so you could be here for an extended time. But I've also been taught that brevity is a virtue. So I'm going to try to keep it short. But there's 100 people right out of the chute that all of us should thank each and every day. And if you believe in a supreme being, you should maybe give thanks. And that's the 1972 Montana Constitutional Convention and the 100 delegates. I was a high school senior in 1972. And you don't think about things like the Constitutional Convention that much at that age. And it probably wasn't until the mid-1980s, late 1980s, when I started working on some interesting cases involving attempts to avoid workers' compensation exclusivity, immediate employer, safe place to work cases, defeating subrogation efforts from in-state and out-of-state insurance companies. And fortunately, when I look back and think about it, between Tom, Mark, me, and some of the many other attorneys we associated with and worked with, we got some damn good results that I think all of us are very proud of. And when I went to work for Tom, I said, I don't want to work on just run-of-the-mill cases. What I want to really do is work on big cases, but more importantly, cases that can make a difference in the law. And that's pretty much what we did. We decided to, either go big or stay on the porch, and so we mixed it up pretty good. But when I analyzed those results over the last week or two, they were only made possible by one thing, and that's the 1972 Montana Constitution. And every one of those successful results was either grounded upon the Montana Constitution or fueled by the Montana Constitution. The Sunburst case, the Oberson case, the snowmobile case, all of them revolved and were enhanced by the Montana Constitution. So the only advice I have to young folks is, buy a copy of the Montana Constitution. I know it's in the first volume of the Montana Code annotated. Buy a freestanding copy and start reading it. And much like your contracts book in your first year of law school, underline that sucker, highlight it, and you'll have a prosperous career where you can advance not only the issues or the interests of your client, but also the law. I listened to Professor Johnstone's wonderful presentation this afternoon about the Constitutional Convention. And there are so many heavyweights that we should give thanks to. First of all, Wade DeHood. Much of what we did in Safe Place to Work cases wouldn't have been possible without the bad decision of Ashcroft versus MPC and then the constitutional reaction to that. Mick McEwen, who is one of my all-time favorite attorneys. I had cases with Mick and against Mick. Recently, he testified on our behalf in a case that's now in the U.S. Supreme Court. But I know Mick, and I treasure his friendship greatly. But I know that Mick, if and when there's ever a gravestone, the first thing he would want on it is author of the Montana Constitution. And it's in his resume. It's just great. I just kind of wish the McEwen boys would get off their duffs and nominate Mick for this. So, and I always get teared up about this stuff, so I apologize for that. But in that Constitutional Convention, DeHood, McEwen, there's one fellow that sometimes doesn't get as much credit, and that's a fellow by the name of Jack Schultz out of Billings, Montana. You noticed today during Professor Johnstone's presentation that Jack Schultz was the chairman of the draftsmanship committee. So he actually wrote the Constitution in final form. He was a wonderful writer, a terrific lawyer, great success at the Montana Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court. But he and his wife, Eddie, were like second parents to a bunch of us growing up in Billings, which included the Sheehy clan. And we all know about the Sheehy clan. I went to Catholic schools, so there were 6 to 8 Sheehys ahead of me and probably 6 to 8 Sheehys behind me. And there was one Sheehy in my class, Kate, and also a number of Schultzes. And the connection here is that Skeff Sheehy, who I believe was a recipient of this fine award, was married to Jack's sister, Rita. And Skeff and Jack were law partners for many, many years in Billings. They were so far ahead of their time. The story is, and I hope it's true because it's such a sweet story, but they wanted to get involved in politics, and so somebody had to stay at the firm and make some money to feed all the mouths, and they'd flip a coin. And I think Jack Schultz perhaps won, and he ran for the legislature out of Billings. And if anybody's tried a case in Billings or even been near Billings, it's a Republican stronghold. So Jack and Skeff developed the idea that they'll run as a Democrat, or excuse me, run as a Republican. And he won. So he served in the legislature. Then the Constitutional Convention came up, and I think the same process was involved, and Jack was fortunately the one that was allowed or voted in to go to the Constitutional Convention. And I used to think, oh, that's in a way it's a shame, because can you imagine Skeff Sheehy at the Constitutional Convention? It would have been worth videotaping and watching forever. And then I thought about it a little bit more and recognized just how skillful a writer Jack Schultz was. And I thought, if Skeff was involved, Article 2, Section 16 would probably be a limerick. And if you had a decoder ring and looked through the lengthy preamble, if you looked at the first letter of each sentence, it would probably say something like, take this Anaconda Company and stuff it where the sun don't shine. So it's a good thing that Jack was the fellow that went. But as early as the 1950s, Jack Schultz was involved with a group of scholars who took on the Anaconda Company. And I didn't know about this until we started suing the Anaconda Company for workers that were diseased or killed because of heavy metal poisoning, mesothelioma, any number of issues. And we started looking into, why didn't the media know about this? And we discovered from reading books like Smoke Wars and others that there was something called the copper collar. And the Anaconda Company owned every single daily paper in the state other than the Tribune. And so they controlled the media. And the more you read, the more you find out they also pretty much owned the courts and the legislature. And Jack Schultz and a number of other really far-reaching, bright people actually came out with a quarterly magazine called the Montana Opinion in 1956, 1957. No longer in print. Might be able to get it on microfiche. And they attacked or raised these various issues about dark money, corporate malfeasance, clean and healthful environment, all of those issues, freedom of the press, and really made a difference. But when you read those Montana Opinion quarterlies, much of that actually came to fruition in our Montana Constitution. And so Jack Schultz deserves a big, big debt of gratitude. The Schultz home was one where when the rest of us were concerned about sports and other things, Eddie Schultz would introduce us to love art, and also we were required on overnights to read the Gazette from front to finish and then talk about it over breakfast. And for most of us, coming from more, I guess, normal families at the time. This was such an eye-opening experience. So late in Eddie's life, when we were working on these cases, trying to put them together, she sent me a copy of the Montana opinion, which is probably the last copy known to exist, and I have it in a very safe place. And she left a little note that said, you were a little scruffy, but we always thought you would kind of make it and fight on the good side. So, you know, that left a lasting impression. And when you come from a family of coal miners, you know, there's a certain reason why you like to fight each and every day for those people. The other people I have to thank are also in the hundreds, most likely, but it's our clients over the last 39 years, especially the last 25 with Tom, Mark, Ben, Ross, Keith Marr, who did some wonderful work, Andy Hooper, who did just some great scholarly work on some big cases. But our clients, you know, they come to you damaged mentally, physically, emotionally, and when you look at their situation at the get-go, you think, you know, if the tables were switched, I don't know if I would be able to survive or if I would even care to. And then something miraculous happens, and it's such a great teaching moment in life. And I've developed a scientific theory, and I don't know if science has embraced it, but you know, in the types of cases that we've dealt with, asbestosis, toxic torts, science is usually about 20 years behind. Everybody knows it's happening, but the science hasn't caught up. But I know for a fact when these people are injured and they come to you and they put their trust in you, and it's a long, long, painful process like the earlier speaker mentioned, some endorphin kicks in, and not only do they want to just survive, but they want to thrive. And they do. And so these people, their lives are altered, they're changed, but sometimes they are, in a sense, enhanced, but what they really do is they just enhance everybody that has the opportunity to work on their case. And that's the greatest benefit of what we do and what we've been able to do. Obviously, family. Jackie Amsden Slovak, my spouse, you know, she gets it. She's an Amsden, and she's the smartest of the bunch. And if any of you know John Amsden, you know, it's not a small achievement to be the smartest of the Amsden clan. They're a pretty good crew. And then so many people that I had the opportunity to practice with and against. And that includes, believe it or not, some defense people. But as part of that constitutional convention or thereabouts, maybe the best thing that ever happened to me personally as far as being a lawyer was the elimination of sovereign immunity. And you may think that, yeah, recoveries against the state, recoveries against municipalities, and that's partially true. But the real benefit to me was that I was hired by Mike Greeley, then Attorney General, to work in a new, very small group in the Attorney General's office where we were essentially private counsel and would represent the state of Montana in highway design cases, civil rights actions, premises liability. And fortunately, as Tom indicated, when I was getting schooled in those days by the very best that MTLA had, folks like Cliff Edwards, maybe even more so Rich Anderson, Don Malloy, John Hoyt, Terry Treeweiler, the list goes on. Fortunately, the state had a cap of 300,000, 750,000 at the time, because I'm sure otherwise their bond rating would have suffered significantly. But some of us learn by reading or teaching or whatever, and some of us learn best by doing. And I learned best by doing, and I learned best by having my nose bloodied in the learning process. And John Hoyt did things to me that, you know, probably should be illegal, but he did it professionally, and I've never lost the lessons that I learned from folks like John and Terry. And Rich Anderson, to this day, in my book, maybe the finest plaintiff's attorney that's ever practiced in the state, other than our firm, of course. But Rich was such a gentleman to work with, and I remember in a premises liability case involving a school district, he was requesting an opinion from a lay witness, and I foolishly made a technical objection on foundation. And Rich Anderson grinned like only Rich could grin, probably had a chew in, and he just nodded, and then he set forth in the next minute and a half the most exquisite, the most beautiful foundation that you could ever imagine. And I'm sitting there over the 90 seconds, and I'm going, I just made this testimony so much more powerful, persuasive, incredible. And then Rich looked at me and he said, is that adequate? And I just nodded, yeah. And for the next 25 years, in my briefcase, I carried a transcript of Rich Anderson's foundation. So Rich isn't the only one. Tom Lewis learned so much, and then I've learned so much from my friends. Monty Beck, right at the very top of the list, just an excellent attorney. Don Harris, and so many others. So I need to thank them. Sometimes it's a little bit of a lonely journey, but with such support from such a fine group, it actually went pretty fast, all things considered. So, in closing, go buy your copy of the Montana Constitution and do right and do good, and everything will be fine. Thank you.